composition, storytelling, character design, and feeling is more important than logic, perfection, that I feel like people put too much emphasis on today. Okay, so I did this video where I go through my art books. Still my most popular video, lots of people coming back to it, and I got a lot of really nice comments on it. So yeah, I'm gonna start at the book that I didn't get to in the last pile. I specifically got a comment from a really sweet person saying like, oh darn, I really was looking forward to that last book, which is this one. Two other people who did watch the other video and commented and asked for another video. Thank you so much. That really meant a lot to me. The response was so nice. I started this YouTube channel to kind of get out of my own head and, get into the habit of doing something and then releasing it and doing something and releasing it, which YouTube is a great platform for. I have never really expected anyone to actually choose to subscribe to my channel. It meant a lot to me to get so much positive response. So anyway, yeah, let's dive in. To the person who specifically wanted to see this book, this one is for you, and thank you so much for commenting. Thought about you for several weeks, feeling bad that I haven't had the time to get back into this. So first up is Erté. As I've mentioned previously, history is a huge inspiration for me. Late 19th century, early 20th century are some of my favorite times. That whole transition from what I think of as like the old world into modern world. So yeah, we have some excellent use of color, some clear lines. I think also another lesson to be learned from this particular art is simplification. There's so much to learn from Art Deco. I'm someone who definitely overworks things and adds details that no one's going to see. Just indicating that maybe there are a few leaves there is enough. And it's fun to see how the illustration is translated into a sculpture or a piece, jewelry or something like that. There's a lot of influences from antiquity, and there's a lot of influence from other cultures. Excellent costume inspo in this book. What I like about this art is the use of color. There's some very clear color theory here, and I think also the use of a limited palette, which I don't think you would necessarily think when looking at them, and it's so impactful. And I think for me, when I started doing illustration for myself, taking it more seriously, I suppose, the thing that I've struggled with is color. Building a palette to work from took a long time. And maybe I should make a video of this instead of rambling in this video about color. I'm not a trained illustrator. Illustration's just kind of been my tool for other forms of design or other forms of storytelling until I realized that actually the tool that I've been using for most of my life, when I started working in offices and stuff like that, I kind of became the person who did mock-ups and I did sketches and I did marketing material, and I realized that actually maybe I should try and do this full time for myself. And I put way too much pressure on myself. And it was a lot of work, but because I'm not a trained illustrator, it never occurred to me. I always thought that you don't need references and you have to figure everything out yourself. When you look at art history, the people that stand out or that we remember are the people who did original things. At least that was my takeaway. And so it took a really long time for me to realize that actually those people were building off of what other people had done. It took a long time for me to realize that it is fine to draw inspiration from other people. It is fine to look at other people. But I think also the next important step is make it your own. Something I also missed last time was these books. I grew up a fan of Marvel. My favorite comics were Daredevil. I just really liked that he was blind. I thought it was really cool how he gained heightened senses, and I loved the artwork that shows what he sees. I don't know, I'd never seen that before. I was 11 or something like that. I also really like X-Men, and in the beginning of the MCU, that was a really exciting time. I don't know if you remember it. We have Thor, the art of Captain America, the first Avenger. And then we have Iron Man 1 and 2. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but since I was very young, I've been drawing comics. It's a medium that I really love. It's a very interesting history, and I really love manga also. That was what I first started reading. So yeah, as a fan of visual artistry and VFX and storytelling, visual storytelling, these books are great. It's fun to see how they've pulled inspiration from the comics and how they've translated that to film, because it is a completely different medium. There's one thing to see a character being drawn, but then a completely different thing to see that character as in a human form. You know, there's a bit of that, how far can we push the outrageousness of a design? And I'm not sure if people will agree with me. I am a huge fan of the Captain America comics. I did a project on Marvel when I was 16 or 17. At that point, I'd mostly read X-Men or Daredevil comics, but that project got me into Captain America. I think because as Captain America has evolved, and especially what they did with this film, is the origin of the character is really interesting. It's essentially propaganda, I guess. Genuinely love the aesthetic of the first Avenger. I think it's really cool. Oh yeah, and obviously the first Avenger has Peggy Carter, who is the greatest gift to the MCU, and for a long while after this movie came out, I would just casually dress like Peggy as everyday wear. This was when I was in drama school in London, where no one really cares about how you dress, but yeah, I love Peggy Carter. Yes, there's some great fashion in this. I think that's also the thing, is that there's 1930s, 40s fashion in this, which is excellent. So next up this is a Swedish title, which translates to The Horse in the Cave, and it's about art history. Here we go. What this book does is track, in a very simplistic way, the evolution of visual art from prehistoric art all the way up to expressionism. Written by a Swedish art historian. Apparently this was published in '94. So this has always been in the bookcase in my mother's home. She just gave it to me when I went to art school. Showing photos of early cave paintings and sculptures, talking about what these pieces have meant at the time, and just showing the evolution of the way art developed. But what is great about it is that you get a really clear overview of what has been important to capture. In a way, art has always been something that is decorative. It heightens our experience of a place. In a way, it's been an expression of skill and status and that kind of thing as well. But also, we've always wanted to capture the same thing, which is life. And the next one is similar to that, because it is clothing history. I mentioned in the last video that I drew a lot of inspiration from, folk lore, folksy stuff is a huge inspiration for me that I pull a lot from. And similar to the Horse in the Cave, this one, Kropp och kläder, translates to body and clothing. It does a similar thing of kind of showing us the evolution of clothing. Fabric, how the body has been portrayed, how the ideals and ideas of body has changed. Yeah, so I think these books are great for inspiration when it comes to world building, if you're an aspiring author or comic book artist or game developer. And it covers a lot of different cultures and just the way we've altered our bodies in different ways, in different cultures and different eras, in order to show status. The definition of beauty is really interesting, and I think absolutely beautiful imagery in here. And it also makes comparison between different cultures and different eras. So on this page you have dress that a Mongolian shaman would wear, with added metal bells and chains for decorative pieces. And then next to it is a military dress, like a Western uniform from early 20th century with the different medals and chains and stuff like that. So the idea is essentially the same. They're showing rank through different decorations. And I just think that's really cool. The way we're all sort of the same, but we think we're different. It's somewhat surface level. It's kind of quickly moving along, obviously, because there's only so much space, but it covers a lot. And there's lots of visual references, imagery from different cultures. History, man. If you haven't dived into history, if you're a creative artist, if you're a visual artist, you're missing out because there's just so much. There's just so freaking much. Moving quickly on to the next one. Because I'm Scandinavian, this is a very important formative artist that I regret not bringing up last time, and that is Tove Jansson. I'm not sure how well known she is outside of Scandinavia. She was a Finnish artist. She was born in Finland, but Swedish speaking as well, which if you don't know the Scandinavian history, Finland used to belong to Sweden. They became independent, but there's still lots of people in Sweden that are natively Finnish speaking, and there's lots of people in Finland that have grown up speaking Swedish due to this very long influence. So that's just brief background. But anyway, if you've heard of Moomin, Tove Jansson is the creator of the Moomin characters. And as a Scandinavian child, you grow up reading her books. And this one is my favorite, and it's actually an early copy of it. And she has really fun characters, but most importantly, her art style is amazing. It's use of color, it's the cross-hatching and the use of texture. Also, like, just really fanciful. And you'll see the text is like handwritten cursive style. And this like textured style just really was a huge influence for me. And again, like I said, use of color, more kind of primary than the Art Deco one. It's the simplicity. This is a bit later than the Art Deco, but I think there's a lot to be learned from the simplicity because there's still so much to look at and they're so harmonious. And even the use of white, it's so purposeful. This is really nostalgic. This is so nostalgic. So yeah, this book has a lot of characters from the Moomin stories, if you've seen the anime, which is a Japanese adaptation of her work. Tove Jansson, Moomin, very important influences as a Swedish child. And in Sweden, I'm not sure if this is an international thing, but in Sweden she also illustrated Bilbo or The Hobbit. So again, several generations of children grew up with the Hobbit book being illustrated by Tove Jansson. So this kind of ties into childhood influences that have shaped me as a human. These are completely different things, I know, but in my mind it's under the umbrella of Tove Jansson. The Hobbit was a very important book for me growing up. What? When you talk about influences, when you talk about, important or like defining influences in your life, for me, The Hobbit definitely was. My dad read this to me when I was 6 or 7, and it's a book that he obviously read as a child and wanted me to read. It's just ink drawings, and I think that's so underrated. As you may have gathered, aside from me saying 100 times that I'm a perfectionist, there's also that aspect of not trusting my ability. With this channel, I want to make it clear that you can do anything. But I think for me, it's really interesting because these are images that were etched into my brain from a very young age. And this was illustration for me. Then when I went on to pursue art for myself, I wouldn't allow myself to do something like this. I think it's that thing of there has to be more work put into things. If it were me, if I had made this, I would feel like this isn't enough. So it's really interesting actually going back and looking at these and feeling like the work that I do is enough. I'm just putting unnecessary pressure on myself. I anticipate what people are going to think, and I don't think that's very good. Editing myself into being palatable for many people, and that's just not conducive to creativity. I think now in the weeks that I've taken time off, I've been really good in reiterate to myself that the reason I'm sitting down to do this, the reason I've chosen to make videos is for myself to share the joy of being creative. You can do whatever you want. That doesn't mean that you can phone things in or just not put effort into something. Like, creative work still takes work. There's so much online that tells you to do things a certain way. Just the other day I saw a tutorial how to do like cross-hatching and stuff like that. And now looking at Tove Jansson, who is a world-renowned illustrator after all, she doesn't adhere to those rules. She's doing her own thing, and the focal point of the illustration isn't the cross-hatching. The cross-hatching is a tool to convey this image, which is a forest on fire. In these lines on this page and these blobs of ink, you can make out light and shadow, fire and trees, and you can see characters reacting. You can actually see body language and expression, and they're just blobs on a page. And I think all of those things, composition, storytelling, character design, and feeling, is more important than logic, affection, and all those other things that I feel like people put too much emphasis on today. So yeah, anyway, Tove Jansson, huge inspiration. And yeah, so I brought my dad's copy of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Not actually an art book, but we're already on kind of the topic of world building, and I'm not sure that Tolkien knew every single millimeter of this world when you zoom in. But you as a reader fill in the blanks, and I think that's what makes his form of world building so influential, and why so many people have taken after this form of world building. Maps are fun to draw. Suddenly a really great story comes out of it. I think I was going to say something else, but yeah, world building, man. Oh yeah, so I think I've mentioned this before. This has become like a blueprint for the ultimate fantasy or world building. However, I think what's important to remember about Tolkien, primarily or originally, he created the world for himself. Created the language, and then he thought it should belong to a world, and he built this history and all of that. And amongst that history, there ended up being books worth publishing. So happens that other people enjoyed reading. And I think that's a very important takeaway. So much of what we do today is about the end result, and that leaves very little room to play. It loses a bit of that humanness. If you're someone who takes a long time to make something, doesn't cross-hatch the way someone online tells you to, don't worry about that. If you're someone who's feel like you're kind of stuck in a loop of trying to make things but it never coming to fruition, take a step back and try to have fun with it. Yeah, I'm the queen of basic advice, but sometimes you need to hear that. Finally, I also have some children's books that I'll just show you really briefly. That's kind of the theme we're on, world building and childhood. I just wanted to show you some children's books that I grew up with. Lennart Hellsing is famous for his kind of quirky children's books and songs and rhymes and that kind of thing. And yeah, they're just really fun illustration. I think children's books are a great source of inspiration. I've always been really fixated, when I did my own art, that it should make sense. It should be logical. And I'm really proud of, again, my line work. I'm good with anatomy and composition. And I'm really proud of my light work, getting light and shadow, because of the mood and dynamics that it adds to an illustration. But something that I do want to get better at is just letting go of logic a little bit. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this illustration with the house and people playing music, the proportions are kind of off. Again, I've tried to make things perfect and palatable to other people. And in the process of that, I think I've lost touch with the creative and playful aspect of making art. Trying to make something that's perfect and palatable kind of has the opposite effect. This was my favorite book as a child. Yeah, it's just this little dove chick who's lost her way, needs to find her way home, but every house looks the same, and every house is a different animal that lives there, and they're all having different kinds of pancakes. And again, with a limited palette. It's on a yellow background with green and red and black, and that's it, and it's so cute. I love it. And then finally, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I have a bachelor's degree in architecture, and I am really interested in architecture, specifically architecture history. Before I went to drama school, art school, I was on the verge of maybe getting into conservation, but then I got into the master's program. So yeah, that kind of never happened, but my sister and I went on our only sister's trip together. We went to New Orleans, and I got this book. So there's these architectural drawings of the different types of houses. Very basic drawings, but you get a really good sense of how people lived, especially in that particular climate, which I think is really interesting. interesting to see how history changes design. Thanks to everyone who asked me for a second video. I hope this was as insightful. I got a little bit off topic a few times. Hopefully I said something interesting. I feel like there's some topics in this video that I could expand upon. So if that sounds interesting to you, or if there's something that I said that you were like, I'm not sure I get that, or I would like to hear more about that, please let me know and I will try to make that happen, and hopefully not too far off in the future. I'm really grateful if you clicked on this video, if you watched to the end, commented or liked. It really does make all of the difference. I hope you have a wonderful week and I'll see you back here soon. Take care.